Hey everyone, this is me, the Undead Viking. I want to just give you a quick little presentation about Gameknight poker chips. Dave at Gameknight was kind enough to send me a sample set so I could kind of show them off and you can check these out. I'm not really going to go too far into what you're going to be using poker chips for. I'm going to save that for my little last thoughts type of thing. But let's just dive in. I'll tell you all about these. Alright, cool. Alright, so I'm going to talk a little bit about these Gameknight poker chips, and if you have actual questions about poker chips in general, I did do a video about them quite a while ago now, maybe a year ago, but if you just search my channel you can find it, so I'm not going to go too far in depth into poker chips as far as the way they're created or the different materials or what have you. I'm just going to kind of talk about what you're looking here. Now, I will briefly say a few things. These are what are called ceramic poker chips. Now, that doesn't mean they're like, you know, baked in a kiln or anything like that. They are like a plastic, like high definition plastic that is used, that I believe is heat compressed. And what happens is that the graphic that's on the chip is actually like heat transferred into it. This isn't like painted or anything like that. And I'll show you little close-ups here in just a couple minutes or so. And these are used, like the chips, the type of chips you're seeing right here, like these are used in a lot of casinos as far as the type of chip they're used. I don't quote me on this, but I believe that like the European World Poker Tour uses a ceramic chip much like this. Okay, so just these are top quality stuff. I mean, as far as like the components and whatever. I mean, like, you know, people use them like, you know, for real poker tournaments and what have you. So keep that in mind. And as you can see, there's lots of different denominations. I do apologize, like, I did this I don't think is like the final. This is like a sample that I was sent just for this video, and I do think they're going to make sure that like the red 5 and the kind of orangey 50 are going to be different. Like, I noticed they're like kind of close to color, and like the difference between the two colors is much more pronounced in person. I do know on the video it's going to look kind of close, and I'll show you a close-up of those two as well. But you can definitely see they have the several different denominations. There's a couple things I really like about the denominations. One, they have a 20. You know, that doesn't seem like a big deal, because like, what's the difference between having a 20 and a 25? There's a lot of reasons why when you're playing an 18xx game, having a 20 is so much better than having to like have 4 5s or 2 10s or something like that. If you're an 18xx person, you probably recognize that. Now, that isn't necessarily like a make or break type of thing, but it is definitely handy as far as that is concerned. You'll notice also as we climb up, we have the 200s, which I think is a really nice step between, between the 100 and 500, and and having a 50 along with the 25, I think is also a good step as well. And as the 2 and the 5 and the 10, there's a good gap. I like having the 2000 to go with the 1000 for the same reason that I like having the 100 and the 200. There's lots of different games, things like that, where having a 200 or a 2000 chip is really useful in certain situations. Now, you don't have to have all the denominations, but if you wanted all of them, you could. Now, the other thing I really like about the numbers on here is that they don't have like a dollar sign on them or anything like that, meaning that they can represent whatever. You can use these as victory point tokens, you can use them as represent cash, you can use them to represent literally anything, because of the fact that there's no iconography on there to actually make a difference as far as that is concerned. Now, a couple quick things. Now, a lot of you are very familiar, like if you've had poker chips, you probably have played with something like this. These are like the poker chips that you can get like in any set you buy at Walmart or what have you. They have no number on them whatsoever, and these are like perfectly fine as far as like a cheap poker chip go. And obviously the problem with these are, other than the fact that it's tough to tell. I mean, these just feel like plastic, right? And whereas these are like a plastic like polymer, it's tough to understand, it's tough to explain like the actual like, and it's very tough to tell, and you have no shot at seeing this, but there is like kind of like almost like a like a feel to it, like a texture on here, whereas this is just smooth. It's just a smooth, and you can kind of tell because when you put two of these together, you know, and they just, you know, there's no grip, there's no texture there. And it's almost like a linen finish, if you're familiar with that, on cards. Whereas if you have two of these chips, and like, here, I'm going to wait for this to kind of come into focus so you can actually see what I'm doing here. Like when you rub them together, and you may be able to hear that, you can kind of hear the finish that is like the texture that's there. And that way you can actually have large stacks of these and they're not going to fall over, you're not going to have problems with it. Now, there are definitely chips. These are, like I said, top end quality. There are chips out there that you can get better quality, and like here I have some of the poker chips I have from, and these are like true, like I should say there's no true clay poker chip, because clay poker chips just don't exist because of the fact that clay is a very it just wouldn't stand up very well to the rigors of using poker chips at casinos and what have you. People say clay chips. It's a clay composite is what it is. But these are made by like classic poker chips, and these are like top end quality chips. These are like my my set that I have that is you know, straight from Rounder's movie. This is like from Teddy KGB's, like these little logos. And these are, like, as I said, these are top end, but you know, these are, you know, far more up the ladder as far as quality and as far as price goes. So, you know, I wanted to kind of give you the, like, you know, the bridge the gap between like top end and like bottom end, and then this is in the middle. And this is way further up on the ladder than the middle. I mean, it's like if I was, this would be down here and these would be right there and these would be right there. So keep that in mind. So as you can see, each one of these has, each one of these chips like has like the number on there, and then they have on the side, they have these edge spots. Now edge spots are on chips usually because when you have a stack, you can actually then see, you can recognize what they will have. Like you can see the side of this, and once you've used these chips, a lot of times you're going to recognize these as ones. Now, also the color will give it away as well. And so I'm just going to show you one of these 5s and one of these 50s next to each other, so you can kind of, and hopefully you can kind of tell when they get closer. Now, admittedly, like I said, it is evident, you know, this is more of an orange and this is a red, obviously, but the edge spots, once again, will let you know. Once you play with these, the 50s will have the actual like progression of having them, the edge spot halved, whereas the 5, because it is lower, doesn't have that spot. See, I'll kind of show this to you. So here you have the 1, 2, 3, and 5, and you notice their edge spots are all these flat, like no division in there. Whereas, as we climb up the ladder, these edge spots have the two-tone on them. And so you can kind of recognize that as well. And I should mention, oh, one other thing, and you probably could see that in that last spot. These will have, like on the sides here, once it comes into focus, and I'm going to have to put my hand behind it probably for the camera to come in focus. Let me find it again. They'll have these little dots on them where the injection process is. That is standard. There's no real way you can get away from that. That is going to appear on these. It doesn't affect it at all. It doesn't actually show, but that's where like the injection mold works. Okay, so then moving up the ladder, what we have is we have these are the next scale, and you notice that, and actually technically I should put this with the other ones, but as we go up, you can see we have a middle and the two ends, and then finally these are our thousands, 1,000, 2,000, 5,000, 10,000, and then you can see as we're climbing the ladder, we even get bigger and bigger until we end up with these big 10,000 chips, and we have the 5 spots. Now, I really like the fact that they went to the trouble of having the edge spot progression on them, because that matters a lot to me as a poker player. You know, it gives more gravitas to the larger number of chips. And with the set that I'm thinking about picking up through Gameknight, I would probably use these more for poker than anything else, just because of the fact that they also are on the lighter end. These are going to weigh you about 9 grams a piece. Now, why does that matter? Well, it doesn't sound like it's a lot, but when you have 300, 400, 500 of these chips, and you have them in a case, and you can pick up cases for these anywhere. If you go to Amazon or whatever, you can pick up cases relatively inexpensively, and then they are fairly modular for the number of chips you have, whether it's 1,000 chips, 500 chips, 600 chips, 750 chips, 300 chips. It's pretty easy to find these, but as you have more and more chips, even at 9 grams a piece, they really start to weigh a lot. I recently took a couple of sets of 1,000 chips, two cases of 1,000 chips to my friend's house to play poker, and I mean each case weighs about 30 pounds. So having these lower weight chips is really helpful as well. So ultimately, these chips are awesome. I mean, they look great. They look awesome. They feel nice. As you can see, I am stacking these in this giant stack. And one thing that's happening is look, I mean, like, if I had a stack of these that high, first of all, I'd have spinners, which are like uneven, like thicknesses to the discs, and so that I would be able to spin the chips, and that's something that's tough to explain, but it just basically means lower quality. But if you notice, like I'm tapping this pretty heavily, and it's rigid, it's staying there. These aren't going to topple over, and you would never have your chips stacked this high anyway. Maybe you would, but it'd be pretty rare. That could never happen with chips like this. Now, ultimately, it just depends on whether or not, like, you think this would be helpful for whatever home game you're going to use them for. Whether you are a person that plays a lot of 18xx games that need a replacement for paper money, or if you're going to have like a home poker like group that you want to have these for. But you really can't go wrong with these. These are top of the line, and they are absolutely amazing. But I'll talk a little bit more about that and poker chips in general and my final thoughts. Alright, thank you very much for listening to me talk about poker chips. I really like talking about poker chips. It's one of those like kind of ridiculous subsets to my hobbies. And then for whatever reason, I really just enjoy the whole process of it. I remember I kind of went down down the rabbit hole with them, and when I was looking for my first really good set of poker chips, and then there's a lot of information out there, and it's pretty interesting. If you want to dive into it, it's pretty cool, and you can kind of learn a lot about how poker chips have progressed and so forth. And I talked a little bit about that in that other video I mentioned that I did. And so if you want to check that out, go ahead. You can probably search for it and find it pretty easily. Maybe I'll put it in the comments section or whatever in my video. But regardless, so ultimately, this is a top-end accessory to your board gaming or poker playing ventures or games or what have you. This is not going to be for everyone. I'll fully admit. A poker chip ultimately is just that. It's a poker chip. It represents something other than it isn't. So if you're playing for money or whatever, you can sit down. You can say, okay, these are going to be worth $1. These are going to be worth $3. These are going to be worth 20, and so forth. And you can just say that. You can do the exact same thing when you play an 18xx game. You can just say, this is what they are, and then you just do whatever it is that you're going to do. You play your game, of poker or whatever, and the poker chips represent that, and it'll be just fine, right? You'll get through the game, it will be just fine. There won't be any problems as far as that's concerned. Now, ultimately, it's one of those things where you have to decide if you want to make an expenditure that is going to just raise the bar a little bit with, like, the games that you are playing and what you are doing. Now, if you are playing these with poker, I mean, it's just one of those things where I think I played poker for, 5, 6, 7 years with these kinds of chips, right? And the poker that I played, wasn't any less fun or any more fun because I used these. However, when I actually started playing with a better version of chip, and I was able to have these at the table, it just looks nicer. It's a better presentation. It's just a lot more like there, if you will. The immersion, yes, if you will, to playing poker is just there. Now, if you're playing board games, ultimately you have two things, right? And yes, if you are a poker chip playing person, like if you want to like do shuffling with your poker chips, or if you want to do these things, or do the poker chip flips or things like that, these work wonderfully for that if that's your thing. But regardless, ultimately it's one of those things where if you want to play the game, and paper money is just, it's what it is. I mean, it'll work perfectly, as far as like, showing you how much money someone has. But 18xx games and games like that where money matters, a lot of it comes down to like being able to glance at somebody and seeing how much money they have and knowing fully well what you should do as far as setting your stock share price and other things. You know, even games with bidding and things like that, being able to look and see, as long as money isn't like a secret component, being able to look at somebody's chips and immediately saying, all right, well, he's got, you know, 3 3s and 3 5s. So you just say, okay, he's got, you know, $24, right? Yeah, okay, I did that right. So you just say, okay, I know exactly how much money that person has. Instead of somebody saying, you know, how much is in that pile of paper money that you have over there, and you know, and that's just a better way to play it, and it's just it speeds things up. And there have been many people way smarter than I have that have determined that like games like 18xx, where you have tons of money being traded back and forth and cashed in and put back and so on and so forth, having poker chips to facilitate those transactions actually will decrease the amount of time it takes to play that game over paper money. And so there's something to be said as far as just the interaction of the game to do it. And for me, it's one of those things where you can also use these for victory points, you know, and so there's lots of times in games like maybe like the cardboard counters for the victory points just aren't really, you know, there's a lot of old Martin Wallace games that use those tiddlywinks money. I mean, like I have a set of poker chips that are just in like a lot of my Martin Wallace games because I've gotten rid of the tiddlywinks money that was in there, and I just use poker chips instead. It's just a better way to handle that money, and it just feels better than having a bunch of little plastic chits in your hand. Ultimately, it just comes down to, you know, you can play those games with what's given. You could go out and pick rocks out of your garden and use those for the money, right? It would represent what you want them to represent. You could, and so it's not something where it's a make or break thing. This is a just an upgrade to what you have, and it is a really good upgrade. These chips look amazing, they feel amazing, they are, if you buy these, you will never have to worry about like having like something for all those different games you have that like supply you with paper money that, you know, just stink. You will never have to like worry about what you're going to use for that, and it's just and it's just, obviously this is kind of a niche thing, but this poker set will last your lifetime and into the lifetimes of your descendants, and they are that good. You could take these and you could throw them on the ground as hard as you can, and you might crack them, you might scuff them up, but they'd still maintain, you know, I mean, I suppose if I really tried, I might be able to break one. And I can feel it bending a little bit. If I had a pair of pliers, I could probably snap it in half, you know, like, and I know people that do stress tests with these things like that, but these are very good quality. They aren't going to bust on you. They aren't going to break on you. And, yeah, I mean, they're really good. And if you've been waiting, you've been kind of thinking, should I get one of these? You know, do I want to upgrade? Do I want to have this? You really can't go wrong with this set, especially with the fact that on this Kickstarter you basically can like pick whichever denomination you want and kind of just determine the set on your own. There's a lot of times when like you buy poker chips off of websites and things like that, they like will sell you the chips that they sell you are just like, oh, you have to buy this amount of this many, and so you end up with a lot of extra chips that you don't need. So for that reason, also, it's just really handy the way that this is being handled. So there you go. If you have any questions about these poker chips or poker chips in general, I'd love to talk about it actually, because it's something that I really enjoy. Thank you very much for taking time to watch this video, and until next time, you have yourself one heck of an awesome day. All right, bye bye.